Who's going to be able to handle the pressure this week as we get into the vaunted Week 13 of the NFL season, the hallowed Week 13? Let's give a quick update on the playoff scenarios here. We have one member of the League of Legends that has already clinched a playoff spot. That is Ryan, who sits atop the League of Legends standings with a record of 10-2, even with the loss last week. He is cruising right on through to the playoffs, so he's good to go. Cam has put himself in excellent position to make the playoffs with an 8-4 record, winning last week. He now remains in second place. But then from there's a lot of mystery in terms of who's going to get those last two spots. Myself, right now, in the third position, lost 3 in a row, scoring around 100 points. That's not going to cut it. Really need to stop the bleeding this week in order to stay alive in the playoff hunt. Dennis right now is in fourth place at 7-5. He's cruising right on through. He needs another big couple of wins here to secure his spot in the big dance. And how about the contenders? Bud, 7-5, right there in fifth place. And Dave and Sean trying to make a late season run here with records of 5-7. They're going to need to win and get some help if they want to make it to the big dance. So let's give a quick recap on what happened last week in the League of Legends. I went 2-3 on the week, bringing my overall record to 39-16. Now, without wasting any further time, let's get into the action, shall we? Adam comes in with a record of 4-8. He faces off against Steve, who comes in with a record of 3-9. This is the battle for the pink shirt. So even though these two gentlemen are not alive in playoff contention, there's still something to fight for. No one wants to wear that pink shirt to the annual end of the year party. So let's look at that matchup first. For Adam, I like Emmanuel Sanders this week. He is at San Diego on Sunday. Really, Osweiler found him frequently against the Patriots last week. He's coming off an injury, but he looks good to go for this week, so I expect Emmanuel Sanders to have a big game on Sunday. Looking at the down category, a guy I liked last week that I don't like this week is Vincent Jackson. Vincent Jackson faces off against the Atlanta Falcons. It is a home game. However, the secondary in Atlanta is actually pretty good. They played in a tightly contested ball game last week against the Colts. Their secondary is solid. Vincent Jackson may not find a lot of footing there to get his usual catches and targets in that particular contest. Looking at Steve's team, a guy that exploded last week against the Pittsburgh Steelers is Doug Baldwin, who faces off against the Minnesota Vikings on the road. With Jimmy Graham out of the lineup now, that opens things up for Seattle. They should be able to find Baldwin frequently in this contest, so I like for him to have a big game on Sunday. Looking at the down category for Steve, Zach Ertz is a guy who's coming off an injury. He faces off on the road against New England on Sunday at the 425 game. Zach Ertz has really been inconsistent this year. We still don't know who's going to start at quarterback for the Eagles. All our eyes are on Sam Bradford to make his much-anticipated return. But I don't think that Zach Ertz is going to give Steve enough from that tight end position to have an effective game on Sunday. Taking everything in totality here, I'm going to take Steve to win this one. I think there's a couple of guys on his team. I like that running back he just picked up from the San Francisco 49ers. So I think Steve's going to win this one and really make it a dogfight to see who will finish in last place in the League of Legends standings. Now let's get to some of the games with playoff implication. Let's first look at Ryan, who we had already mentioned off the top, has already clinched a playoff spot. He is 10-2 right now, still sitting comfortably in first place. He faces off against Dave, who's trying to make a late season charge here. He's up to 5-7 on the season. He still thinks he's alive because he really is still alive in the playoff picture as we move forward. Looking at Ryan's team first, a guy who's been pretty good all season, really one of the top fantasy wide receivers this year is Julio Jones. Julio Jones faces off against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It is a road contest. It really doesn't matter. Julio Jones has been very effective against Tampa Bay in the past, including the previous matchup that they had this year. So I look for Matt Ryan to target Julio Jones early and often. He is their success measurement. If he does well, the Atlanta Falcons will do well, and I think that Atlanta really needs this win on Sunday, and that's really going to benefit Ryan and Julio Jones. Looking at the down category, Ryan's really gone through a number of different players at the tight end position. This week, he's going to land on Crockett Gilmore, who is the starting tight end for the Baltimore Ravens. Now, Crockett Gilmore had some really strong games the last couple of weeks, but unfortunately, Joe Flacco got hurt just as he was starting to develop that chemistry with him. So now with Matt Schaub at quarterback, you saw his productivity last week dip. He only had 30 yards receiving last week. I think he can do better than that against Miami on the road this week, but I just don't see him having a huge game there, and I think that is the one weakness on Ryan's roster as we head to the playoffs, his tight end position. Sticking with the tight end position, I'm going to look at Dave's team. I think this is a huge opportunity for Greg Olsen to have a monstrous game. We all know these dire straits that the New Orleans Saints are in right now, particularly with their defense, but their offense doesn't look much better either. Nonetheless, Greg Olsen is in line for a large performance on Sunday against the Saints. Sticking with Dave's team on the downside, he's been up, he's been down. It's because of the quarterback situation. That's Dez Bryant. Dez Bryant is facing off against the Washington Redskins in the Monday night contest. It is a road game. It is all about the quarterback. They don't have the quarterback there. It's not enough to get Dez the ball on a consistent basis. It really has been a down and disappointing season for Dez Bryant as a whole, so that is unfortunate as a very top pick for Dave this year. So I just don't think Dez Bryant's going to give Dave enough at the wide receiver position. However, I like what Dave's putting together on his roster. He's got some really strong pieces now. I like D'Angelo Williams to have a big week, Greg Olsen, and even Cam Newton, who I already gave Dave a lot of crap for this year for keeping him on his roster. It will pay dividends this week because Dave is going to win this one. He's going to move to 6-7 on the season and stay alive in terms of the playoff hunt. Sticking with the playoff hunt, Dennis right now comes in with a record of 7-5. He is in the 4th position currently in the League of Legends standings. He faces off against Bill, who I predicted to win last week. It didn't quite work out, and it eliminated Bill from playoff contention. He comes into this contest with a record of 4-8 on the season. Looking at Dennis's team, the tight end theme will continue. I'm going to go against what I said a couple of weeks ago. Jordan Reed is going to be in my up category this week. He faces off against the Dallas Cowboys on Monday night. We all talked about that trade, that Rob Gronkowski trade, certainly with Gronk going down. That's a huge bonus there for Dennis. So he's going to start Jordan Reed. He should see a lot of targets. So, all right, Dennis, it worked out for you this week. What do you want me to say? Looking at the down category, a guy who has been historically bad this year is Davante Adams. He has had multiple opportunities to really take on a large role in the Green Bay offense, and he has just not delivered. It's been a combination of poor, ineffective play as well as injuries. Davante Adams has been dealing with a lot of nagging injuries throughout the season. I know this is a favorable matchup. He faces off against the Detroit Lions tonight on the road. I just don't have any confidence in the player. I just don't see him being able to be consistent throughout the full game and give Dennis the points that he's going to need as he tries to make this playoff push here in the last 2 weeks of the season. Looking at Bill's team, Danny Amendola should be receiving the bulk of the targets for the New England Patriots on Sunday. They face off against the Philadelphia Eagles, a secondary that is in absolute shambles right now. They just put Nolan Carroll on IR, so he will be inactive for this game. Amendola certainly is coming off an injury, but ultimately Brady needs one of those underneath guys to throw to. You saw it last week against the Broncos. They really struggled without that slot presence of Edelman and Amendola. So Amendola is going to pick up right where he left off in that Buffalo game 2 weeks ago and have a big game for Bill on Sunday. Sticking with the same game, I'm going to put DeMarco Murray in the down category. He faces off, of course, against the New England Patriots. Struggled a lot last week. He only had 30 yards on the ground. Patriots have done, for the most part, a pretty decent job against running backs. Really where you saw them struggle last week was when Hightower was out of the lineup. It looks like Collins is going to be back for sure. Hightower has been practicing this week for the Patriots on a limited basis. I'm going to assume that both will be ready to go for Sunday, and that will negatively impact DeMarco Murray's performance on Sunday. When you look at this matchup, this is a must-win situation for Dennis as he tries to hold on to that 4th seed. Unfortunately, Bill has made some really shrewd pickups over the last couple of weeks, and that's going to be enough to catapult him for a victory this week. He's going to move to 5-8, while Dennis is going to fall to 7-6, and is certainly going to need some help if he wants to hold on to that 4th and final playoff spot in the League of Legends standings. Another game with huge playoff implications 7-5 Bud, who currently sits outside of the playoff structure, but he's right there. It's a point situation. He needs to catch up on those points, so this is going to be a big week for Bud, not only to win, but to bring up his point total, which has been very low the last few weeks. He faces off against Cam, who had a big win last week against Bill. He moved up to 8-4 and now has sole possession of second place in the League of Legends standings. One more victory for Cam, and he should be good to go for the playoffs this year. Looking at Bud's team, I'm going to put Julius Thomas in the up category. He faces off against the Tennessee Titans. It is a road game. Blake Bortles has been throwing the ball left and right, and Julius Thomas last week was the main recipient of those targets. Allen Hurns right now is out of the lineup for the Jaguars, so Julius Thomas emerges as the second target there for the Jaguars this week, and I like for him to have a big performance on Sunday against the Titans. Looking at the down category, a guy who had a little bit of a resurgence last week. He had 73 yards rushing for the Redskins. That's Alfred Morris. He faces off against the Dallas Cowboys in the Monday night contest. For me, it's just that Alfred Morris has not found the end zone this season. It's hard to believe. He's been a very good fantasy productivity guy the last couple of years. Alfred Morris has not found the end zone, and I don't think he's going to find the end zone this week against the Dallas Cowboys, and for that reason, I'm going to put him in the down category for Bud's team. Looking at Cam's roster, a guy that really is going to explode now with Ben Roethlisberger back in the lineup, that's Antonio Brown. He faces off against the Indianapolis Colts. They don't have really the cornerback that's going to be able to shut him down like they did last week in Seattle with Richard Sherman. So I anticipate Antonio Brown coming through with a large performance this week against the Indianapolis Colts. He's going to have Vontae Davis, who is a very underrated cornerback, but I think Brown can exploit that matchup. I think he's going to be in for a large game on Sunday night against the Colts at home. Looking at the down category, a guy if you look at this guy, his projected total is very high this week, and the reason I'm going to put him in the down category is just because I don't think he's going to get his projected total. That's Mark Ingram. Mark Ingram faces off against the Carolina Panthers. It is a home contest. Certainly we know that Carolina's defense is very strong. They are still undefeated in this particular season. Ingram's going to need to catch some passes. That's really going to be the key. He's projected at 18 points. I don't see him getting to 18 points. I could see Ingram having a 12-point type of performance on Sunday. So I'm specifically putting Ingram in the category here on the downside just because I don't see him getting that 18 points that he is projected on Yahoo. When you're looking at this matchup, a lot of holes on Bud's team. He knows this. He's trying to plug those holes the best he can with all the injuries that he's had. Unfortunately, Cam's team is really starting to take shape at the best possible time. He's starting to really play well now as we get even closer to the playoffs with 2 weeks left. So I'm going to go with Cam. I think he's going to ride that wave right on into the playoffs. He's going to win his 9th game of the season and solidify that second place position for the playoffs moving forward. So big win for Cam here. And Bud's really going to need some help. He's going to need guys like Dennis and Dave and Sean potentially to lose as well, or myself, depending on how you look at the playoff structure. Now let's get to the matchup of the week, which faces off the 1-7-3 Fulton matchup right now. Sean comes in with a record of 5-7. A huge win for Sean last week. Very important win. He beat Ryan to give him his second loss of the year. He faces off against a very struggling roster in myself, coming in with the record this week of 7-5. Been an up and down season for me. Losing streaks, winning streaks, losing streaks again. So let's see what happens this week as these two gentlemen face off and the closest projected outcome of this particular week 13 in the fantasy football season. Looking at Sean's team, I gave him a lot of crap on this because I did not want Sean to pick up this player. I was hoping someone at the bottom of the standings would be able to pick him up. They were not, so it will be a huge benefit to Sean for the remaining 2 games of this regular season. David Johnson is a guy I'm putting in the up category for Sean. He faces off against the St. Louis Rams. It is a road contest. I know the Rams have a very good defense, but David Johnson is the lead dog right now. Chris Johnson is out. Andre Ellington is banged up. He may or may not play in this contest. So that, to me, is a green light sign for David Johnson to have a very effective game on Sunday. Regardless of the opponent, he's going to see a large volume of carries and targets throughout this game. Looking at the down category, a guy who's been pretty good this year. He's had a couple of good weeks. but it's really the matchup here that concerns me the most. That's Mike Evans. He faces off against the Atlanta Falcons. It is a home contest. It is a it is a home contest. I'm sorry. Mike Evans against the Atlanta Falcons. He did not perform well against the Atlanta Falcons last time out. Their secondary is actually pretty good. They did a decent job against the Colts last week in regards to the secondary. So I just don't have a lot of confidence that Mike Evans is going to come through with the type of game that we've been accustomed to seeing out of him over the last couple of weeks. So for me, Mike Evans is a guy I don't have a ton of confidence in this particular week. Looking at Drew's team, a guy that astonishingly, out of the 11 games that we have had thus far in the season, he has only started and finished 3 games this entire season. However, he's going to be back this week. He's facing off against a very beatable matchup. That is Ben Roethlisberger. He faces off, of course, against the Colts in the Sunday night contest. It is a home game. He's got his full arsenal of weapons. Antonio Brown, Martavius Bryant, Marcus Wheaton, who had a good week last week, D'Angelo Williams, Heath Miller. A lot of guys there for Ben to throw the ball to, and I like for him to have a big performance on Sunday night because this is a game the Steelers absolutely have to have in order to stay in contention in the playoff structure. Looking at the down category, a guy that I don't like this week. He did have a good game against this team last time out, but it's really because of Josh Norman. That is Brandin Cooks. He faced off against the Carolina Panthers as a home contest for the Saints. The Saints are an absolute mess right now on both sides of the ball. I don't think we've ever seen Drew Brees look as poorly as he's played the last couple of weeks. So that, to me, does not instill a lot of confidence in Brandin Cooks' ability to have a big game on Sunday. Now, when you look at this matchup, monumental matchup for both gentlemen as they get into this Week 13, as they try to make that playoff push. Really haven't seen enough from Drew's team the last 3 weeks to have a lot of confidence in him moving forward. I like the pickup of David Johnson for Sean. Buck Allen had a big week for Sean last week. Matt Forte is now back in the lineup, so I am going to take Sean to win this one. He's going to move to 6-7 on the season. Drew will fall to 7-6. That is further clouding the playoff structure here, so we really don't know by the end of this week who's going to be in and who's going to be out. There's a lot of parity in this league. Make sure I'll get that spelling right for you next time, Dennis. So it really does add to the element of surprise, if you will. Who is going to make it? We have 2 weeks left in the regular season before the playoffs start. A lot of guys are in it, which is awesome to see. So best of luck to everybody out there as they go into Week 13 of the NFL season. And, of course, as always, enjoy the action.